Oh, yeah.
Testing.
Guns, this is not a gun bill. Uh, the whole purpose behind this meeting, and if you all will excuse me, this is one of the legislators calling now. I think he's probably having time. This is Senator Frank Gann. Please pardon me while I take it. Create this study committee has been Lauren Palvo. And Lauren, if you would just kind of come up and take a seat over here, because I should have and we should have a couple of questions for you as we move forward with all of this. But one of the things that I thought about in creating this study committee is what can we do to save as many children as possible from an untimely death associated with a weapon in someone's home that's not stored safely. That's the overriding and pressing concern that I have in regards to the work that I plan to do on this study committee for the next several meetings that we have. And I would kind of ask that we all do the same thing, kind of focus on what's important. And I understand this is not just a Georgia issue. As our president said last night in his speech, is a national issue. But our purpose is to focus on what we can do in our great state to save as many children as we can. I'm State Senator Emanuel Jones. I've served up here for the last 20 years. And Lauren, we've had many conversations about this topic for many, many years. And let me thank our Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones, for empowering this study committee and moving forward with it to give this committee a voice, to give those of you that are here present and that will be speaking today an opportunity to share their story. And I would tell you that this study committee has been lingering around this building for a very, very long time. And it wasn't until Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and I had a conversation and he said, Senator, I would work with you. And he has been true to his word. When I think about the opportunity we have with this study committee, I want to focus everyone's attentions on a couple of things. One is tax credits. And, we've come close in passing legislation in this body. And I'm hoping that with the work that we do on this study committee, along with my other colleagues, that we can move something forward. The other thing is proposed legislation for the use of safe storage for households with young children. And I don't know what that legislation is going to look like, but I'm hoping that by the time that we complete this study committee, we always have an idea of what legislation like that would look like for households that have young children. We've talked about an educational campaign shared by various institutions and professionals. And I'm hoping that's something that our great state can get behind and show some leadership throughout the state in providing some guidance on what this would look like. And if you ask me now, I would tell you I don't know what it's going to look like. But again, that's the whole purpose of this Safe Storage Study Committee. And I think one thing that's really, really important to me that I've pondered for a very long time is how do we measure success with this study committee or with whatever legislation that we pass? And to me, I think that's one measure that we should use in how do we measure success is certainly a reduction in child fatalities. Thank you. And I think that's paramount in anything that we do going forward. So those are just 4 things that's been on my heart that I wanted to share in my opening remarks and my opening comments. And I hope and pray that we all can focus on what this committee is all about and any contemporaneous noise out there that we can shut that out and focus on what's important in saving lives for our young people in our great state. And I would hope that Georgia can take some leadership on that effort as well. Because as I said earlier, it's not just a state issue. This is a national issue. And we have an opportunity, and I've pledged, and Lauren, I've pledged to you that as long as I'm here, I will continue to work on this issue until we can move something forward. Because my goal is a reduction in child fatalities, young people, and ensuring that pediatricians have the resources they need to communicate effectively with parents that have young kids and weapons in the household. So again, let me thank all of our speakers today. And all of our panelists that's going to participate in this discussion, and even those that are joining us online, because this is a bigger issue than I originally thought. And as our president said, it's the #1 killer of young people in households. I think, Lauren, you've educated me enough to know that when a child grabs something other than a weapon in the household, the chances of surviving that kind of an incident or accident increases significantly. But when a child grabs a handgun, the likelihood of that child surviving that injury is very, very low. That's what's at stake here. So thank all of you all. And Lauren, again, let me thank you publicly for joining with me and encouraging me and inspiring me, and not just me, but certainly the other members that are tuned in. And of course, this entire General Assembly, you've been a warrior out there, and thank you for your advocacy on behalf of those that you represent. I am going to move directly into our agenda. Hopefully everyone has had a copy, an opportunity to see the agenda. If not, let me know. And my Senate admin, Megan, who has been working with me throughout, if you could get some additional copies of our agenda. And I will go over this agenda. And let me also introduce Sam Tillman, who is standing up with Megan, and she is going to, between the two of them, they will get you a copy of the agenda. We don't have any secrets here. And I promise we will be open and as transparent as possible throughout this study committee. On the agenda, while my Senate admin goes and make copies of it, I would tell you that the first speaker that we have today is Mike Webb. And Mike Webb is a parent, and he is going to speak for at least 5 minutes. The second presenter is Andrew Ziffer, and I do apologize if I pronounce his last name incorrectly. He is Giffords for Gun Owners and parent, and also a parent as well. And then we will have 3 panel discussions. And the panelists on the first panel is the Senate Research Office presentation on safe storage tax credit, and Olivia Lee, Every Town for Gun Safety, who's a legal counsel, by the way. The second group of panelists will be Oliver Price, NRA certified firearms instructor. Dr. Claudia, and I don't want to pronounce her name, Fruin, Dr. Claudia Fruin. Thank you for attending, retired pediatrician and safe storage advocate. And the final panelist will be Pastor Sean Smith, First Iconium Baptist Church, and Leonard Dungy. It says Hope Hustlers. Just want to make sure I got that correctly, and it's not a typo on my sheet here. And we're going to allow 15 minutes for each of the panel discussions, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions as well. And trust me, to those that are presenting, I have lots of questions. So Lauren, before we get started with the first panelist, do you have any opening remarks you would like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure if
what's the number? 12?
Yeah,
right,
I just really want to
bring
thank
it forward,
you for your leadership on this particular issue. We know that gun violence prevention is a really complex and kind of multifactorial issue impacting our children. I think through my own particular journey on this, I've been connecting with so many wonderful people in the community, whether it's community-based organizations, physicians who are involved in hospital violence intervention programs. We can do more for our children. And I think what we've determined is there are people who are focusing proactively, and there are people who are there to help us when those measures may fail. And all of them have wonderful, thoughtful suggestions they're hoping to bring to the table throughout several discussions that you plan to hold on this. And we're very grateful for your stewardship and for your willingness to listen. So with that, I would love to turn it over to someone who can help us remember our why.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished committee members, my name is Mike Webb. I had the good fortune of raising my children here in Georgia. All 4 of my grandchildren were born here. I am neither a Democrat or a Republican. While preparing my testimony, it occurred to me that I've voted for exactly 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans for president in my lifetime. I was raised in a small southern town. I became a gun owner at 12 years of age and have been one ever since. We were taught basic gun safety in the field, but safe gun storage at home was almost never discussed. Our guns, sometimes fully loaded, were throughout the house.
Mm-hmm.
We knew our dad kept a loaded handgun under his mattress. I remember we routinely showed it off to our friends when we were children. Looking back, it's a miracle that none of us were killed with it. In 1999, my 18-year-old son, Jared, was spending several weeks with his grandparents on their farm. Jared was popular. He had a great sense of humor. He was also a Georgia State wrestling champion. Late that summer, I received a call that changed my family's life forever. It was my mother. She handed the phone to a sheriff's deputy who told me my son was dead. Jared and his grandmother had been arguing mostly about chores. After an intense exchange, Jared grabbed a loaded shotgun that was next to the front door. He ran out and shot himself. Nobody saw this coming, and I certainly didn't do enough to protect my child. You see, not much had changed. My parents still kept loaded guns lying around the house like they always did, just like millions of parents and grandparents do today. Privately, I began to study gun safety, and I never kept a loaded gun accessible ever again. I took gun safety classes and was tested. I shared the details of my son's death and discussed the importance of gun safety and safe gun storage with family, friends, and business associates. I purchased a gun safe, which I still own today. Over the years, I became an educated and responsible gun owner. Recently, my family experienced another gun violence tragedy here in Georgia. My former wife, my daughter Jamie's mother, was one of the 8 innocent people that were killed in what we all know as the Atlanta spa shootings. One of the worst mass shootings in Georgia history, and I believe it was avoidable. You see, gun violence comes in many forms. Many times it is the direct result of negligent gun storage and safety. More children die each year from firearms in the United States than any other cause. I submit to you that gun violence is a national epidemic and a public health crisis. Now, in 1960, our country had another public health crisis, years of skyrocketing motor vehicle-related deaths. So in 1966, Democrats and Republicans worked together to bring about swift change. New safety standards for vehicles and roads and traffic safety were established. We created safety regulations, licensing, and testing, among other initiatives. The result, we now have 15% less deaths on our highway than we did in 1966, even though we have 4 times as many vehicles. So we have a successful model, and guess what? We don't have to take the guns away any more than we had to take the vehicles away in 1966. Let's stop trying to create panic by hyperventilating about some non-existent, diabolical plan to take our guns. And let's do something productive for a change. We can work together and do many things. Just for starters, I believe we can educate and create public awareness in our schools, churches, and at public places and events. Expose good, law-abiding gun owners to the benefits of safe gun storage. Even figure out a way to acquire and distribute free safety devices for guns. This committee has a power to help all Georgians. I believe each and every one of them deserve a strong bipartisan effort, and I pray you will give just that to them. Thank you.
Powerful words. I can simply say that I agree with you. This is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. It is a Georgia issue. It's a national issue. Thank you for your courage to speak, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please, while our next presenters. Okay. I've been kind of passed the note that we're just going to rearrange our panel discussion to give the ladies from NCSL an opportunity to speak that are on Zoom with us. And I'm okay with that. And let me just kind of share with everyone who our members of this committee. You see there's some placards up here. Senator Watson is on this study committee. He is the chair of the Health and Human Services. Senator Marta Harbin from the 16th is the chair of Government Oversight. Senator David Lucas from the 26th, he is the Secretary of Urban Affairs, and Senator Frank Gann, who is on this Zoom call with us already, is the chair on State and Local Government Operations. So those are the members we have on our committee.
Glad to be with you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Senator, let me just recognize you. I think you've heard some of my opening remarks and comments, and let me just yield the floor to you and see if there's anything that you would like to share with members here today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a competitive shooter in high school and college. Like the gentleman that just spoke, unfortunately, I know what it's like to lose the life of your son. I can greatly empathize with him. I'm a member of what was formerly Georgia Carry, now GA2A, and the life member of the NRA. And, you know, I agree that there's things that we can do that are smarter. So there's also things that I'm going to do to make sure that we don't do anything to take away or harm anybody's Second Amendment rights. And I appreciate your leadership on the committee, Mr. Chairman. Said it is one of those things that, you know, I think about guns being like a parachute. Said you only need one when you need one, and if you need one and you don't have one, then it's not doing you any good. So that's where for me, guns are a great equalizer for those that are small in stature or frail, and it's a very difficult situation that we deal with because it is somebody's protection that we're interested in, and a lot of times law enforcement can't respond fast enough to a active crime situation, and the right of the individual to be able to protect themselves from that is very important. So I look forward to the discussion today, and great to be with you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gann, and I appreciate those opening comments. And again, for full disclosure, I own guns as well. I'm ex-military. I spent 19 years in the United States Army, so it's not a topic that I shy away from in terms of the use of firearms. I tell everybody that I was trained by the very best in the world. Our next presenter, please, NCSL. And I believe they are coming to us via Zoom.
That's correct. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Jones, for inviting us to speak for the committee today. And thank you to all who are there, and thank you for having us. My name is Andrea Jimenez, and I'm a policy associate for NCSL's Fiscal Affair Programs. And with me today is my colleague, Ann Teagan.
Hi, I'm Ann Teagan. I am the Associate Director of the Criminal and Civil Justice Program at NCSL, and my portfolio includes firearms.
All right, and I believe I will start sharing our screen.
Do we know how to do that?
Yes.
We hope you do.
One moment. Apologies.
All righty. Are you able to view our screen? It should be a blue. Okay.
Okay, and then we're gonna. There we go. How does that look, everyone?
We still can't see anything.
Oh,
Oh gosh. Okay.
okay.
Let's. Oh, I see it.
Apologies. We have 3 screens up, and none of them seem to be.
There we go.
Great. All right. And yes. All right, so just kind of going to jump into things while we get the slideshow going. Oh, there we go. If you're not familiar with NCSL, we are a bipartisan organization that serves legislators and legislative staff of all 50 states and territories. We provide research and analysis on all manner of policy topics, and we do lobby on behalf of state interests at the federal level. I do want to clarify that we do not have an official opinion on safety device tax incentives for firearm safety devices. And with that, we'll jump right in. So there are a total of 12 states that offer tax relief for firearm safety devices. 10 of those states have sales tax exemptions, and 2 of those states provide tax credits on firearm safety devices. This number has grown since 2020, when then there were only 4 states that offered tax relief for these devices. Those states were Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Washington. One other thing to note is that Louisiana, Michigan, and Virginia all have temporary sales tax incentives on firearm safety devices. In Michigan, the exemption goes through December 31st of 2024. Louisiana's tax credits have a sunset date of December 31st, 2027, and Virginia has a sunset date of January 1st, 2028. This slide has more information about the 5 states that have most recently enacted these types of laws. And there are some details here. So I know I mentioned that Virginia and Louisiana have tax credits. Virginia offers a tax credit of up to $300 for the purchase of a firearm safety device. And Louisiana offers up to $500 for the purchase of a firearm safety device. And so in general, every state does define firearm safety device very similar. They include safes, lock boxes, trigger locks, and barrel locks in this definition, but it can vary. Florida explicitly names every device that the exemption covers, while Tennessee offers a definition for what that safety device needs to be able to do in order to qualify for the exemption. It's important how a firearm safety device is defined, especially when it comes to estimating the cost of that sales tax exemption or the tax credit. And costs, as mentioned, costs do vary from state to state. Tennessee estimates a revenue loss of $1.2 million in fiscal year 23-24, while Texas forecasted a revenue loss of $880,000 in fiscal year 2023. And they do expect that those costs will reach up to $1.4 million by 2026. Now, for the states that have a tax credit, Virginia was not able to estimate the cost of their tax credit, but they expect that that loss will be minimal. Louisiana, on the other hand, estimated a loss of $500,000 in fiscal year 2023 and 24, and the same for the following fiscal year. Virginia does cap their tax credit to, they cap it to up to $500,000 per tax year, while in Virginia, as mentioned, their tax credit is up to $300, and that safe cannot cost any more than $1,500. And here I have a full list of those state statutes for the tax credits and the tax exemptions. I'll end here and hand over the presentation to my colleague, Ann Teagan.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I was struck by what Chairman Jones said when he was talking about how do we measure effectiveness, and that is one of the questions we get quite a bit at NCSL is there evidence that the policy that we are considering implementing actually does what it's intended to do? And there has been no research that I have found that specifically looks at if sales tax exemptions on gun storage devices actually reduces unintentional injury, reduces suicides, or reduces homicides. But that's not to say that there is no research. There has been some research done on firearm storage, and I am going to go through a little bit right now. First, I did want to go into this slide. I wanted to discuss what this definition of safe storage is, kind of give you a baseline of what has been agreed upon by a few organizations of what safe storage is. Unloaded firearms should be stored in a locked cabinet, safe, gun vault, or storage case. They can also be secured with gun locking device that renders the firearm inoperable, etc. So that's a definition of safe storage. There has been a number of studies that give us some really good information related to firearm storage devices. First, there was an audit of 20 firearm safety training courses, and they found that in 90% of those training courses, they discussed using a gun safe, and 50 to 70% discussed using cable locks or trigger locks. 10% recommended keeping handguns loaded and unlocked. So this covers the education piece. Most people taking firearm training courses are being introduced to these safety measures for the most part. Another study from RAND found that approximately half of gun owners store their firearms locked, and 1/3 store their firearms locked and unloaded. Washington State conducted a random survey and found that about 33% of adults surveyed lived in a firearm owning household, and of those 33%, about 37% kept all firearms locked and unloaded. So that's a little bit of a behavior piece. So here we are, there's research that says approximately 37 to 50% of gun owners store their firearms locked and unloaded. RAND has looked at much of the research on this and says, yes, there are studies that have attempted to study firearm storage practices. And in those studies, there is some evidence that clinical interventions such as lethal means counseling, communication campaigns, or trainings, they are effective at changing gun owners' storage practices, but distributing storage devices might be the most effective. I've also found that Alaska, which is a study mentioned here in this slide, they found similar results. In a study with the Mississippi National Guard, they also found similar results. Distribution of gun storage devices changes storage practices. Members of the Mississippi National Guard who received a cable lock were more likely to report using the lock than those who did not receive the safety device at both the 3-month mark, which was 60% versus 30%, and at the 6-month mark, which was 58% versus 36% following the intervention. These studies showed that there was an improvement of gun and ammunition storage practices when storage devices were distributed, which means given away. That is not the same thing as a sales tax exemption or tax credit, but this is the research that we have available to us and what research has been done. There's also research that indicates preventing access to firearms and other lethal means allows time for both the moment of intense suicidal crisis to pass and for someone to intervene with a potentially life-saving mental health support and resources. So that is a little bit about the research piece. I know Andrea spoke about the handful of states that have enacted legislation in the last year or two. It has become a legislative trend to do so, but I also wanted to show you a slide with information on states who introduced or considered legislation in 2024.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, she's going to show us a slide, but none of her slides are advancing. So maybe there's something change the setting or format.
My apologies. Can anybody see the slides?
I can see your face on the camera right now, but I cannot see slides. They were on the left-hand side of the screen for a long time. So.
And then okay, it shows that we're not sharing anymore.
I'll take this part. Okay.
Does that show?
Is that showing anything on the screen for?
Yes, it is showing on the left. We see the other slides that Senator Gann just mentioned, but they did not show in the middle. But we do see your first slide, sales tax incentive for firearm safety devices.
Okay. What about if we hit this? Does that
There
show?
you go. Yep, there it is.
Okay. So we can, were you able to see any of these slides or was it just the one slide?
No, it was all of them.
Okay.
And I appreciate you fixing that.
Okay. So sadly, where we are here, just where I went through is on this slide. the proposed legislation that I was mentioning. I just wanted to share that it is a legislative trend. We do expect at least 3 or 4 states to probably consider a sales tax exemption or a sales tax credit next year in 2025 as well. So we have been tracking that California, Oklahoma, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri have all introduced legislation to this effect. I also did want to just mention that with a sales tax exemption, there has been reports from a few states, specifically in Connecticut, that there has been kind of disparate responses from retailers on whether they are actually giving the credit. So that's just kind of something to be aware of that we've heard about going on in the states. If anybody would like our complete presentation to see, please, we will send it out to both Megan and Lexi. But if anybody would like to see any other slide in the next few minutes, we can also show that. And we apologize, Mr. Chairman, for not having this display available.
Well, thank you. And we certainly would like to have a copy of your presentation, and you will send it to Megan. We will certainly make it available to anyone who would like to have it. Thank you for the presentation. There is a question that I have. I heard you mention that when safety devices are given away, the impact seems to be greater than just having some kind of tax incentive for those devices. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say greater because there's never been any studies about sales tax incentives. The only studies that are out there are the distribution or the given away. That's not to say that any kind of incentive, wouldn't quote unquote incentivize. It's just that no academic studies have been done like the ones with the Mississippi National Guard and like the ones in Alaska where they gave them away. But certainly in the next couple of years, I think that there will be results from states who have enacted these measures. I think that there will be some data, and at that point will indicate whether or not it has incentivized folks.
So it appears like an ideal approach would be if states would actually do both, give them away as well as have some kind of incentive. Is that correct?
The research says if you give them away, people use them. So one might conclude that if you give a tax credit, if you provide a sales tax exemption or things like that, that will also incentivize usage. Yes.
Thank you. Chairman Gann, do you have anything else? Well, again, thank you for your presentation. We will move right along with our next presenter. And again, we will make her presentation available once Megan gets a copy of it. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm flipping through my phone and I couldn't get it off unmuted. But one of the things that I want people to recognize is that, somebody that wants to use the device said they are great, more power to them. One of the questions that I would be concerned about is if I look at putting more cost to the consumer for if they're not going to use them, I don't want to see us do something that drives up the cost for all consumers on firearms to take the situation that it's a burden now for somebody to purchase a firearm, more financial burden on that. So that's where, for me, I think there's a happy median we can work on those two.
Thank you, Senator Gann, and I certainly agree with you, and certainly wouldn't want to discourage anyone by increasing the cost to our consumers. I also see that we have 2 other legislators that have joined us. Senator Marty Harbin is online with us, and Senator Ben Watson. And I've already, let me just pause for a moment and give both of the legislators that have joined us an opportunity just to give some opening comments. Senator Harbin or Senator Watson? And it'd probably take them a moment to unmute themselves.
Did that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. I'm en route. I apologize for running late, but at least I can listen and ride at the same time. But no, I think this is that we need to look at safety issues that are there, and also protecting the right of our citizens, which I believe is just as important. And ask the question: where does the safety issue we do not want to take their rights away over just the issue of safety, though safety is important. And then I think this is we need to get some information as far as studying. I picked up on part of the reports that are there, but I know this is a sensitive issue, and one in which I think training is also major. Is that I think this is that training of any kind is beneficial to us, and whether that's NRA training or other training, beneficial, but we ought to look at it. But I appreciate it, and I'll pick up on the rest of the content. I'm probably about 20 minutes out, and I will be with you in person.
Thank you, Senator, and we certainly appreciate you joining us in person. Be safe out there, and thank you for those opening comments. And I also see Senator Watson that's on the line with us as well.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I did catch the end of that NCSL presentation, and I have nothing further to offer to follow up from Chairman Harbin, and I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate you. We did introductions earlier, and let me just remind everyone that Senator Harbin chairs government oversight, and Senator Watson is the chairman of Health and Human Services. Thank you all. We will proceed with our next presenter. And I am been told that Andrew Ziffer we are ready for you. Mr. Ziffer, please join us.
So my name is Andrew Ziffer. I'm the proud father of a college freshman, partner at a commercial real estate firm in Atlanta, and a longtime firearms owner. I've always considered myself politically moderate, striving to understand the complexities of both sides of many issues, including this one. I am also the board member-elect for the DeKalb County School Board seat representing Dunwoody, Chamblee, Doraville, and Brookhaven. But today, I do not speak on behalf of our school system, but as a Georgia ambassador for the Giffords Gun Owners for Safety organization. I stand before you not as just these roles, but also as a concerned citizen deeply invested in the safety of our children. In Fulton County this April, a 9-year-old child came across an unsecured gun in their house. They accidentally fired it, and the consequences were devastating. In DeKalb County this February, a 3-year-old child found a firearm that was left unsecured. They shot themselves in the face, and their young life ended that day. In DeKalb County this February, a 1-year-old child found an unsecured firearm in the home, and they accidentally shot themselves in the head, and that child did not survive. These are not just statistics. These are tragic, heart-wrenching stories of children who should not have been harmed. Their lives were cut short by something entirely preventable: access to an unsecured firearm. In just a few quick Google searches, I found these stories of toddlers and children whose curiosity led them to tragedy. What connects these heartbreaking events? A lack of safe, secure firearm storage in their homes. While many responsible gun owners, including myself, ensure their firearms are securely stored, far too many do not. And the result is catastrophic, devastating families, shattering communities, and stealing young lives from their future. Unsecured guns are a clear and present danger to our children. You've probably heard these statistics before, but let me remind you, these are not just numbers. They represent real Georgian lives. Someone is killed with a gun every 5 hours in Georgia. An average of 205 children and teens die by guns every year in Georgia. Nearly 53% of all guns in Georgia are gun suicides, and almost 64% of suicide deaths in Georgia involve firearms. Gun suicides among people ages 25 and younger in Georgia have risen 19% from 2018 to 2022, more than double the increase seen nationally. States, I'll point out red states like Florida, North Carolina, and Nebraska have taken this critical step. In addition, 20 plus states have safe storage laws on the books. Georgia's current child access prevention statute is weak. It applies only to handguns, and it has multiple exceptions, including justified use of force against another. Georgia's law focuses on the adult's intent, whether they intentionally or recklessly furnish a firearm, creating a higher burden of proof and leaving gaps in accountability. Georgia is smarter than this. Safe storage laws are not about infringing on Second Amendment rights. That's a myth propagated by those who prioritize politics over people's lives. The NRA, the NSSF, and most major gun manufacturers use language on their websites and email outreach about responsible storage practices and locking up unattended firearms. Every single firearm I have purchased has come with a lock. This is about common sense. It's about ensuring that firearms are inaccessible to toddlers, to children and teens, and to those who should not have access to them. This isn't about politics. This is not about politics. It's about protecting our children and our future. Safe storage saves lives. Research shows that these laws not only encourage safer storage behaviors, but they are also incredibly effective in reducing gun deaths and injuries among children and teens. Research shows that even a modest increase in the number of homes practicing safe storage could prevent nearly a third of young gun deaths due to suicide and unintentional firearm injury. These laws were associated with a 13% reduction in all firearm fatalities among 0 to 14-year-olds, with demonstrated decreases in firearm homicides, firearm suicides, and unintentional firearm deaths for children of these ages. Georgia should consider required that all firearms be stored with a locking device and impose civil liability, not just criminal penalties for any harm resulting from the discharge of a negligently stored firearm. To the members of the Senate Safe Firearm Storage Study Committee, Chairman Jones, Senator Watson, Senator Ginn, Senator Harbin, and Senator Lucas, I urge you, let logic and reason guide this discussion, not politics. Let us save the lives of our children by passing a more rigorous safe storage law in the state of Georgia. And thank you for your time.
Mr. Ziffer, wow, thank you for those powerful words. One thing that's resonating with me that you shared was safe storage saves lives. I think that kind of sums it all up. Are there any members of the committee that have any questions for Mr. Andrew Ziffer? I told you, you kind of said it all. Please make your notes available if you can, and we would like to make your comments available to anyone that would like to be reminded of that strong and powerful message that you just shared with us.
Thank you. I will forward them. I will forward them to Megan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ziffer. Our next presenter is Olivia Lee. Everytown for Gun Safety Legal Counsel. Is that correct, Lauren? And then we'll be followed by 2 other panel discussions. And from there, we will have closing remarks.
Okay.
And so I don't have to repeat myself. I will ask that all the presenters kind of make their presentation available to the committee, please.
Sorry, just pulling my notes up. Yes. Hmm. Okay. Maybe at the beginning. Okay. Awesome. My name is Olivia Lee. I'm legal counsel at Everytown for Gun Safety. That means I'm a lawyer that works on legislative advocacy and policies in 9 states. 5 of my states are in the South. One of them is Georgia. I'm here with Clifton Addison, who is our regional director for government affairs. We are so happy that lawmakers have convened this study committee and voted to approve its existence, helping gun owners learn how to securely store their firearms and encouraging them to adopt secure storage practices is a major priority for our organization. And today I'll be talking about why unsecured firearms are a particular danger to Georgia. Sorry. I will then move into a discussion about how other states and cities outside of Georgia have reduced gun violence by passing secure storage requirement laws and by adopting policies that encourage gun owners to use secure storage practices. I really want to emphasize that second part. I think that state legislatures can take many different approaches to encouraging gun owners to do the right thing and securely store their firearms. And finally, I'll wrap up with some solution ideas that could work for Georgia specifically. Secure storage practices keep everybody safe. There are hundreds of millions of firearms in the country, and with that many guns, even if they're purchased legally by their owner, there are shootings that happen that the owner never intended. Some of these unintentional shootings or unintended consequences look like unintentional child shootings, which we've heard about, youth firearm suicides, which we've also heard about, the presence of firearms at school, and gun thefts, especially from cars, which fuel the illegal supply of guns. Gun ownership is a right, but it's a right that should come with responsibilities. Many people decide to purchase a firearm to protect themselves and their families, but they leave their guns accessible to young children or to criminals. In Georgia, if you want to have a pool in your backyard, you are legally obligated to put up a 4-foot-high fence. The gate to the fence has to open away from the pool. The space between the posts has to be 4 inches apart. This is what Georgia does for pools so that children don't fall in and drown. Unfortunately, by contrast, Georgia doesn't have that many laws and has basically no laws that obligate gun owners to store their firearms safely when children are in the house or to lock up their guns when their car is parked. We know from research that the safest way to store firearms is to unload them, lock them up in a box or with another strong safety device, and to separate the firearms from ammunition. But so many gun owners don't do this. And by so many, I mean more than half of gun owners don't securely store all of their firearms. This is a national stat, but I think we also heard from NCSL that this is undoubtedly true in Georgia.
Sure.
So what's the cost? What is the cost when gun owners don't securely store their firearms? We see unintentional child shootings. Georgia has the 8th highest rate of unintentional child shootings in the country. States like Louisiana and Alabama and maybe South Carolina, I believe, are higher. Since 2015, 89 children have died in an unintentional shooting from a gun that was negligently stored. 122 more have been injured. I pulled this headline from the Washington Post. It's a story from 2015. The little girl was Jamaica Smith and she lived in Atlanta. But I think, as the gentleman from Giffords also said, there are, dozens of headlines that anyone could choose from when they're looking about news stories about this in Georgia. Another huge cost that I think hasn't gotten enough or that much discussion so far. Georgia sees thousands of firearm thefts from gun owners every year. And we know that these guns end up in the illegal market and in the possession of people who could not pass a background check at a licensed gun store. This is ATF data. I believe the actual number is like 14,288 firearms are stolen on average from gun owners in Georgia every year. Georgia has a poor ranking when it comes to accidental child shootings, but an even worse ranking when it comes to gun thefts. This state has the 5th highest rate of gun thefts from gun owners in the entire country. And so many of these gun thefts come from cars. In fact, most stolen guns are stolen from cars. Our organization analyzed gun thefts from dozens of cities. Memphis has the highest rate of this problem in the country. Atlanta has the 2nd highest rate. Another unintended consequence of negligent firearm storage is that the guns show up in backpacks at school. They show up where they're not supposed to be. Sometimes they're involved in school shootings. We know from decades of data analyzed by the U.S. Secret Service that around 75% of school shooters get their firearm from a family member or from a relative. But even if there isn't a school shooting, there is still a big, big problem when kids are bringing guns to school. The boys in this image attended Rome High School, and they were featured in a Washington Post investigation about firearms in schools. When children learn that there are firearms recovered at school or in their classmates' backpacks, they are terrified, they're distracted, they're not learning. Some of them just stop coming to school altogether. Teachers feel that their lives are on the line. This is not a sustainable dynamic. So what can be done in Georgia? I believe this committee, and I hope this committee will consider strengthening existing secure storage laws and making secure storage practices commonplace. What could Georgia look like in 5 or 10 years? What if the rate of unintentional child shootings was cut in half? You can see North Carolina and Texas in this slide. Their rates of unintentional child shootings are hovering around the national average. Georgia could move towards those states by adopting child access prevention laws that look more like in line with what North Carolina, Florida, and Texas have. So now I'll discuss, the entire panoply of state policies that Georgia could consider. There are 3 main types of secure storage laws. 2, I think, are probably most important for the consideration of child access. The first is called a locking law. That requires gun owners to lock their firearms either, every time that firearm is not accessible to them or under their control, like they're not carrying it, or if they know that a child could access it. The third kind of practice that I think this committee should really, really consider is just encouraging the secure storage of firearms in cars. As I mentioned, gun thefts from cars are the largest source of stolen guns in the country and probably in Georgia as well. Over half of all states have a secure storage law, whether it's a locking law or a child access prevention law. You'll see that Georgia is not on this list, but that neighbors like North Carolina and Florida are. If Georgia decided to adopt a full locking law, it could significantly reduce unintentional child shootings. And Everytown analysis found that states with locking laws see a 78% lower rate of unintentional child shootings than states without those laws. If Georgia were to adopt a child access prevention law, one that's more in line with a state like North Carolina's, it could potentially reduce the rate of unintentional child shootings by over 30%. So I do want to address the child access law that Georgia does have. It's a law that addresses children getting a hold of firearms, but it's not a law currently that truly requires a gun owner to use secure storage practices. Really, Georgia's law currently is about giving guns to children. It says it shall be unlawful for a person to intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly sell or furnish a pistol or revolver to a minor, or it shall be unlawful for a parent or legal guardian to permit possession of a pistol or revolver by a minor. By contrast, Georgia's neighbors have laws that say, for example, in North Carolina, if a gun owner who lives with children and who leaves the gun loaded and in a place where they know the child can access it, they can be charged with a Class 1 misdemeanor when a child gets a hold of the gun. In Florida, the state law actually says the gun owner has to keep a firearm in a locked box or with a trigger lock if they have a reason to think a child could access it. If the child brings the firearm to school or to a public place, the parent can be charged with a misdemeanor. So I'll now move on to secure storage in vehicles. This state should also absolutely require secure storage of guns in cars, or it should empower the governmental entities within the state that want to do this to do it. As I mentioned earlier, cars are the largest source of stolen firearms, and within that, cars parked at home are the most prominent source of stolen guns. We know that stolen guns are a source of crime guns. The majority of gun homicides and assaults involve illegal or stolen firearms. And so many gun owners are not as careful as they need to be. In Gwinnett County, for example, the police department has found that 66% of gun thefts are from unlocked cars. This is a problem that I've also seen in Tennessee, where one of the lawmakers who actually voted to expand carrying abilities in cars later regretted it because he didn't realize so many people were just not locking their cars. Those are the laws that I kind of wanted to discuss today. But as I mentioned before, I do believe that this committee and the state legislature can do a lot, even when it comes to encouraging gun owners to adopt safe storage practices. The laws are just one lever to pull. But I think with funding and with programs and potentially device distribution, Georgia has the opportunity to make the lives of residents safer. This body could recommend directing state agencies to publish and distribute and run secure storage campaigns and produce informational materials. These are some examples of signs from North Carolina and Texas. I think that this is a great idea because even if you distribute gun locks and, gun safety devices to people, educating them on how to use it and encouraging them to do so by letting them know about all the safety virtues of that practice is really, really important. The state could also, through the Department of Education, direct public schools to distribute secure storage information to parents. I do believe that with the problems that schools are facing in every state and in Georgia of firearms coming to school with kids, this is something that schools should be very, very invested in. And it also just has that ripple effect where, even if the parent is securely storing the firearm to prevent the kid from bringing it to school, they're also doing it in a way that's going to prevent unintentional shootings. It's going to prevent a gun theft. It's going to prevent a firearm suicide. I also wanted to address, since it was mentioned earlier as well, that suicides are a problem that could be reduced by secure storage practices. And secure storage doesn't always have to mean storing the firearm within your home. If you are in a mental health crisis or you are feeling suicidal, there are states that offer ways for you to store your firearm at an FFL. You can even do this if someone in your family is at risk for suicide. There are nonprofit groups in the states on this slide, Colorado, Maryland, Mississippi, et cetera, that have produced maps of entities, whether they're police stations or licensed firearm dealers, that will accept firearms for storage for this purpose. I think that this is probably where the committee is most likely to find, a lot of common ground, incentivizing the purchase and use of gun storage devices. So we've heard about tax credits. Georgia's bill, I think, would have allowed for a state income tax credit of $500 for the purchase of a device or for a firearm safety class. Louisiana has already passed a similar law. They did it in 2023. Their credit is non-refundable up to $300 for a safety device. The one thing I will just note about tax credits is that they're available to you if you file state income taxes. Not everyone, for various reasons, files income taxes. You have to keep the receipt, submit the receipt. So it's a little bit administratively burdensome on the end user, but with the proper public education campaign, I think could be impactful. There are also sales tax exemptions, which I think are less beneficial financially to the gun owner than something like a credit that fully refunds or reduces their state income tax burden by the cost of the gun safety device. Tennessee, in the wake of the Covenant shooting in their special session in 2023, passed a law that said all the sheriff's departments need to distribute free gun locks. So that's what they're doing now. I think Georgia could look at something similar, just making sure that the locks that are distributed are actually strong and can't be cut through. And finally, Atlanta has actually already engaged in a free vehicle gun lockbox distribution campaign. Councilman Antonio Lewis actually, I think just a few weeks ago, held an event where he distributed vehicle firearm lock boxes that lock to a car seat with a cable lock. He, I think, spent 2 or 2.5 years securing $200,000 of funding, and he hosted a training or kind of like a learning session on how to use these with the Atlanta Police Department. And I think he has another event coming up around September 6th. I would really hope that this committee and the state legislature could financially support initiatives like this, because as we heard earlier, if you give away the lockbox for free, that's the best chance of uptake. Local governments can, where they're able to pass their own secure storage ordinances. Obviously, there's the issue of firearms preemption, but I do think that cities, I know for a fact, I've talked to so many cities, especially people in Memphis, they're desperate to try to do something. And I do think that if what they're looking at is secure storage of firearms, when you're not carrying them, it's something that states should consider allowing them to do. And finally, the state could support local police departments that want to run their own public education campaign. Often, precincts and departments know best how to communicate with their own constituents. I have been very impressed with some of the campaigns I've seen that emphasize secure storage as property protection. I was actually in an Uber ride last year from my hotel to the Atlanta airport, and my Uber driver said, you wouldn't believe it, my firearm was stolen from my car. I paid, $700 for it from a pawn shop. And I said, well, where did you put it? He said, it was just on my front seat. I said, you can't do that. You've got to put it in a lockbox. The thing he was most upset about was that he might have to spend another $600 or $700 to go get another gun. And I said, if you do that, you should absolutely lock your firearm up if you leave it in your car, and preferably don't leave it in your car. But Atlanta has in the past, I believe the Atlanta graphic on this slide is from 2015. They've engaged in the Clean Car campaign that emphasizes taking all valuable belongings out of your car, including your firearm. The graphic on the left is from Hoover, Alabama. They have their kind of 9 p.m. routine campaign that says, turn your lights on outside, take all your belongings out of your car, including your gun. I'm going to skip that slide. So another thing that we do at Everytown for gun safety is we try to work with pediatricians' offices, hospitals, anyone that's in a position to distribute secure storage information, and enroll them in our Be Smart program and have them
educate parents on secure gun storage practices. So this is my last page of solutions. I think that there's a lot that Georgia could do, especially starting with the incentivizing of the use of secure storage devices. And with that, I guess I'll just open for questions.
Ms. Lee, thank you.
Or are we out of time?
I don't think the committee would mind if we extend our hours, our minutes a couple. And let me just thank Chairman Harbin for making it here. 20 minutes, you must have been flying. Benefit of having Senate plates. Thank you for everything that you presented. As you were speaking, I was just thinking out to myself that, wow, she kind of touched on a lot of the different things that I it shared with this group in the beginning about tax credits and what legislation should be proposed and what kind of educational campaigns should we all do. I think you kind of hit all the buttons there. So thank you so very much. And certainly I will yield to my colleagues to see if there's any other questions or comments that they have on your presentation. Those that are present as well as
Thanks for having me, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, thank you for having these presenters today. I hate I'm gonna have to drop off the call, but yeah, good to be with you and good information to share with all our colleagues and fellow committee members.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Chairman, again.
Y'all have a great evening. Bye-bye.
See how thorough your presentation was? Go ahead, absolutely.
Question. The issue of suicide, and I'm assuming you gave some statistical data. I was not able to write at the same time, but suicide being an issue that someone's made a choice to take their lives. Of the shootings that take place, do you have them 18 and under? Do you have the percentage of age groups? How that works from that standpoint? Is it 18 and under? 18 and over, and is it on the suicide of total shootings? What percentage make up suicides of total shootings?
So I believe the gentleman, Zipper, who spoke earlier from Giffords, said that 53% of firearm fatalities in Georgia are from firearm suicides. We're more than happy to follow up and just confirm that statistic. In many states, it's more than half. Nationwide, it's more than half of firearm deaths are from suicides. I do know that my organization has published a paper on the increase of youth firearm suicides, which has been happening for the past 5 years. It's an especially notable increase. Georgia has one of the fastest growing rates of youth firearm suicides.
Okay.
I can, if you're interested in a breakdown of what percentage of youth, suicide attempts are with a firearm or that kind of information, I can get that for you.
Yeah, just curious. I've had friends where there's been suicide committed, and they were adults that were able to, the law was not going to stop what they had made their mind up to do as far as that portion in that respect. And very sad, very traumatic to the family as far as that. So I was looking really kind of at children from that standpoint. If we had that on the statistical data for age groups on the suicide side. How do we combat suicide? Because people will find a way many times, but you're saying here that 53% of all shootings are suicide, correct?
Yes, I believe gun fatalities, I
Okay.
think.
Now, when you say gun fatalities, does that include being of an officer, let's say, shooting a suspect in a firearms battle? Does that enter into that number as well?
I think it does.
Okay, so that would include officers doing their duty in a defense standpoint as well. So I'm curious about what percentages are made up. I was listening to someone in Chicago and said that the average shootings in Chicago were anywhere from 30 to 50 per weekend from that standpoint. phenomenal numbers as far as that portion, but I was just curious if that
Sure.
number.
Sure. And for example, it might include, justified or, what a court might determine as a legally justified
Reasonable
homicide.
force or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious as far as that number. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate
Sure.
it. Good job.
And I'll just say the main thrust of preventing firearm suicides is always delaying access. And I do think that it might be easier to do for a child who is not going to know the code to the gun safe, or if the gun safe is biometric, will not have the features that will enable the gun safe to open it. But, veterans groups that Everytown works with nationwide always advocate for an interruption in access, which includes secure storage practices, or as I mentioned in the slide, out of home storage practices.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. One thing that I would like for you to just kind of share again, and thank you for the data on the other states and the summary, but if there were 3 top things that you say we can do in Georgia politically, where we have the political will to get done, what would those 3 things be?
I think Georgia should absolutely consider strengthening its law that addresses children accessing firearms to be more in line with North Carolina, Texas, and Florida. 2 of those states are neighbors, and they have close to half the rate of unintentional child shootings than this state has. I think that Georgia, given the pattern of gun trafficking across the nation, given the fact that there are 14,000 firearms stolen from Georgians every year, should absolutely require residents to lock up their firearms in an appropriate way when they're not in their cars. And I think that hopefully the state legislature should encourage and fund a public education campaign that's really robust and can include, free device distribution. That's not something the state has to take on itself. That might actually be better effectuated like within communities, like, Councilman Antonio Lewis was doing. But I believe that the state should play a role in funding those projects.
Thank you. Any other questions? I see Senator Watson is still with us. Chairman Watson? If not, then we will move on to our next 2 presenters and our panelists. And I apologize for going a little bit over. The first meeting is always a little bit unexpected in terms and hard to gauge in terms of time, by the way. But I want to thank everybody for bearing with us. Again, Chairman Hartman, thank you for being here today. This is important information. And as I stated in my goals in the beginning, that there's that real purpose of this committee is to try and figure out what does safe storage for guns look like for Georgia. And again, the metric is how do we reduce child fatalities in this great state? Those are just some of the things that I'm glad Ms. Lee touched on, and I think you're giving us certainly some food for thought. Our next 2 presenters, we have Oliver Price, NRA certified firearms instructor, and Dr. Claudia. Dr. Claudia, please come up and join us for our next panel discussion. Either one of those seats. And that mic is on.
It's on. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name's Claudia Fruin, and Oliver Price is not here, apparently not feeling well. And I do have a slide presentation that was sent in. I don't know. Okay.
Once I have the presentation up, all you have to do is click the first slide.
So just click the arrow. Okay.
We're high tech here.
Yeah, it's good.
We actually have technology that works now. And while they can prepare, let me just give a shout out to Senate Press, by the way. And I was told this morning about all the new high tech gadgets they have and been installed and how well those devices are working. So Thank you all for being here with us. And Megan, did I thank you in the beginning? Let me thank you again, by the way. We're stalling until we can get her presentation loaded up. Anyone else in here I need to thank? Dan, how are you? Yeah, I represent parts of Henry and DeKalb County, and there are some people around that I've depended on my 20 years in service to this great state, and Dan is certainly one of them. And I'm glad to see you here, Dan. And I think I've sung Lauren praises enough, but certainly I see some key people in here that's been instrumental in advising me as I've moved through this great body. Are we ready?
We're ready. Thank you. Thanks. And
Dr.
thank
Furman,
you.
please
Yeah.
proceed.
Yeah.
See,
Thank
I
you
got it
for,
right this time.
yes, it's all good. So thanks for granting me this opportunity to speak. And I feel the diverse perspectives and the experiences represented here are going to guide us towards unity and the solutions that we need to address the tragic and unacceptable fact that our children are dying and being injured from guns, and that this is a solvable problem and that we can come together. So I bring a unique perspective, I think, not only as a pediatrician, mother, grandmother, but I'm also a responsible gun owner. And it was after the Sandy Hook massacre in 2012 that I was moved by grief and shock to actually do something. So I leveraged my role as a pediatrician in Utah, where I formerly lived and practiced until about 2 years ago. I did this by securing a grant from the University of Utah Department of Pediatrics. And with the help of 2 mothers, I launched a safe gun storage campaign for the state of Utah called Bulletproof Kids. And this was our mission statement, and it was simple. And it's owning a gun is a right, protecting children is a responsibility, prevent youth suicide and accidental injuries, store your guns safely. And so recognizing how difficult it was to pass a stronger gun storage law in my state of Utah, and it's a state that had exactly the same gun culture as here in Utah, so it was easy to transition. So we focused on education as a viable solution. And we developed posters showing children discovering guns in places like closets. These were my patients, my guns, my house. Under beds, or a teenager going through a rough time contemplating suicide. And each poster carried the message, every child is vulnerable, even yours. Store your guns safely. We also produced educational materials for pediatric offices, providing guidance on how to counsel families about gun safety in a non-judgmental way. And our campaign included a comprehensive website with videos featuring endorsements from local police chiefs, a gun store owner, parents, and doctors, all advocating for safe gun storage. And we put up billboards. This was one of our billboards, and we gave out gun locks throughout the community. We made yard signs, and I traveled across the state delivering talks to amplify the message. But despite all my efforts 11 years later, children are dying from gunshots at twice the rate as they were in 2023 as they were in 2013 when I started this campaign. This equates to about an average of 7 children a day. What I have learned from these safe storage efforts is that education on safe storage is crucial, but it's insufficient no matter where you live in the United States. In our country, more children fall victim to gun violence than police officers do. None of us like to be told what to do, and mandates are rarely popular. But when no child should have access to a gun at all, and yet 2,581 children died from gunfire last year, and 3 times more were injured, we must consider laws that enhance their protection. And as mentioned earlier, we've done this before for the same exact reasons, passing seatbelt, car seat, helmet, and swimming pool fence laws, measures that have saved countless lives and are now second nature to us. At a national level, foster parents are required to keep their guns locked. Why should this be a mandate only for foster parents? In Georgia, half the population owns at least one gun. And if we could rely on all of the gun owners to have proper training and to store their weapons responsibly, our children would not be dying from suicide or homicide or being unintentionally injured. And instead, we have some shocking statistics, such as toddlers are responsible for a third of all unintentional, I say negligent injuries, a third. In 2023, in Georgia, almost 700 children under the age of 17 were treated in Georgia emergency room for gunshot injuries. That's 2 per day. Bullets kill a child in Georgia more than every other day. And last year, there were 19 unintentional shootings by children in Georgia, resulting half of them dying. And I looked at this data myself from the health department on this FASTER data, and I was looking to see is there a third really perpetrated by toddlers, and indeed they were. So this was in 2023. I saw a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So these
Sorry,
are
Mr. Ziffer, can you just give me one more moment? I got a question I need to ask before you leave. Sorry.
these are not accidents, they're preventable. In fact, the groups that are most likely to unintentionally shoot each other of the kids are high schoolers, number 1, and preschoolers, number 2. And also remember, the victims of these child shooters are often other children, such as siblings or friends. These incidents occur when children are left alone at home, such as on weekends or during summer breaks, and they typically involve handguns, which are easy to lock and secure. And as mentioned earlier, states with the weakest or non-existent safe storage laws, like Georgia, have the highest rates of unintentional injuries and gun suicides. We volunteers are tirelessly working to address this public health crisis, but we need the support of our state officials. I'm personally involved in 3 key organizations: Georgia Majority for Gun Safety, which is a coalition of gun safety organizations and individuals representing the majority of Georgians who advocate for stronger, safer gun laws. Georgia Clinicians for Gun Safety, a group of healthcare providers in Georgia who recognize that firearm injury and death constitute a public health crisis. And finally, Giffords Gun Owners for Safety. I'm the senior ambassador in Georgia, and what we do is recruit and encourage other gun owners like myself, who, by the way, overwhelmingly support safer gun laws, to speak up. Some of things I just wanted to point out, some of the things volunteers here are doing. Some of the projects, at least I'm working on, is trying to engage the 2,500 federally licensed firearm dealers to distribute, display, or promote safe storage information on their websites, in their shops. We are just on Saturday, have organized and are holding the 2nd annual Firearm Prevention Symposium sponsored by the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is a virtual conference that you guys can sure all be invited to. And then this is an interesting thing as well that's in the early stages, planning an event to educate and train gun violence prevention advocates and legislators with limited or no firearm experience on the safe handling of firearms so we can better understand each other. So the problem is clear, and we citizen volunteers are actively doing our part. So now what can the legislature do to help us? And I just made some suggestions myself. So one of the reasons I wanted to show my campaign was I thought maybe it would entice us to start a state-sponsored and funded campaign to promote safe storage through TV, radio, and social media. And provide funding for gun-safe giveaways in schools, in doctors' offices, hospital nurseries, and emergency rooms across the state. Require that safe gun storage education materials be distributed through Atlanta Public Schools using the Be Smart campaign as a model. funding for community violence intervention programs, offering tax incentives as described for training and for safes, possibly encouraging insurance companies to offer reimbursements for safe storage purchases. Most importantly, to strengthen our safe storage laws in homes and cars to protect children. And finally, just a little mention, I'm speaking for myself here, and this may not go over well with everyone, but would the legislator consider a compromise bill that didn't require guns to be unloaded, but it did require them to be locked when children were present? Because I feel like this may convince those that own guns for self-protection that they could have access within seconds, and it might be better than nothing. That's how long it takes. So even a loaded gun locked in something like this is better than what we have right now. Oops, the best slide. Finally, to close, this is one of my precious grandchildren pictured. Not only are Georgia's children dependent on their families to protect them, but they're also counting on you guys, their elected representatives. So please support in your voice and in your actions what the majority of Georgians are asking for, which is to keep guns out of the hands of children. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Frewen. I would like to have Mr. Ziffer kind of come up and join you for a moment.
Okay.
I know this is kind of off script for a little bit, but I tend to do that, by the way, and I hope my colleagues will allow me this one courtesy. Being newly elected to a school board in Georgia, and certainly one of the school systems in our great state, what do you think about the state of Georgia mandating education, at least for parents, and that school boards touch throughout the great state in an effort to try and educate families on safe storage?
Is the microphone on?
It is now.
The eSmart program, which I believe was referenced before, I have experience with that program. I've talked to the leaders of it, and I've recommended it. Haven't taken office yet. I'm sworn in January, but I have recommended.
That's okay. You got to be ready anyway.
I got to be ready, and I've recommended to other board members that DeKalb County take on this program. But I think at a minimum, my kid, I could just say my experience in my house is that from day one, when my kid was old enough to speak, I explained to them, what do you do when you find a gun? What do you do if you find a gun in our house? What do you do if you find a gun in someone else's house, a friend's house? What do you do if your friend finds a gun in one of their, in a house, in wherever? And at a minimum, children, especially young children, need to be taught what to do with weapons when they're found. And the Be Smart program talks a lot about that. Claudia knows a lot about that too. Claudia and I are both our ambassadors in the Gun Owners for Safety organization with the Giffords sponsors. And so, yes, absolutely. And I will be bringing that topic up once I take office. And I don't see any negative to bringing this up, because it's simply teaching children and honestly parents to be responsible gun owners with absolutely no infringement on Second Amendment rights. In fact, it actually promotes responsibility, and it should prevent needless harm or injury from a firearm.
Thank you, Dr. Frewen. No one at the legislature likes mandates,
I know.
particularly in this body. How do we get around using mandates in order to promote gun storage safety in our
Well,
great state?
that's why I suggested the idea, because I know with a lot of the safe gun storage bills, they require ammunition to be stored separately from a gun, and the gun to be locked. So I think what I've come to learn is reality for most gun owners, and probably include if people, or most of them are honest, they oftentimes, the majority will keep their guns locked up, the responsible ones, but oftentimes they are loaded. And so I think that potentially would be beneficial when we're looking at safe storage bills, is that that there's not a mandate that it has to be unloaded, or that at least that's not mentioned in the bill. I think that's super important. The other thing that I think is really important is people will say, well, how are you going to enforce that? And I would say it's difficult to enforce in the same way that car seat laws, helmet, all of those things are difficult to enforce. The goal of these laws are to make parents and adults do a better job and to get the word out to the children, who are also the ones who will tell parents what to do. You know, if they know they're supposed to be wearing a seatbelt because they've been raised that way, or they're in a car seat, they get uncomfortable if they're not there. The same should be for firearms. It's if they know that's the law, they're going to help their parents do a better job. So the goal is not to put somebody in jail, to fine them a bunch of money. You know, the goal of these mandates are to make parents do a better job, and they would be difficult to enforce, and you wouldn't be going into somebody's home, you know, looking to see if their guns were locked. So I think those are important points to make.
Go ahead.
Could I ask this question?
Does any other presenters want to come up and join us? This is a hot round, by the way.
Other shootings, especially with children, do you know any of the percentages of whether their parents were present at the time? One of the things that I see going on right now is families are in crisis.
Yes.
When you look at 70% to 35%, depending upon what you look at, where there's a single parent family, somebody's trying to make a living, trying to do that. So my first question was, are these children being left alone? Is that when the shootings occur, or is it when a parent present, if you will? That would be a question. I don't know if anybody has any statistical. I see a 1-year-old. I hope that a 1-year-old is not at home by themselves.
I don't think they
are. Or a 5-year-old. Sometimes 12 is, pushing the line. But my question is that when we have an absentee of parents, we have not only problems with firearms, we have problems with everything else that goes down the line, from education to otherwise. We talk about our educational system, but some of these teachers really struggle when that child does not have someone to come home to discipline them. But I was curious, do you have any kind of statistical data whether when the shootings occur, if a parent was at home or not at home, or did these occur? You know what I'm saying?
I don't have that. And the toddler thing, I mean, statistically, you'll read a third of the unintentional shootings by children are, with preschool age kids. And again, I've seen that. I use that stat all the time. And then we have very current data from the Georgia Department of Public Health is faster. And indeed, it was, like I mentioned, a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a third of them were. And they weren't alone. The little kids weren't alone. I mean, they were able to get access to a gun. I mean, there's a recent story of a young child whose, I think, older brother came home from college or whatnot, and just nonchalantly put his gun down. Again, nobody thinks it's going to happen to them. And he took a shower or something, and there you go. So it's just, again, I feel like it's people, they think that they teach their children not to handle them, or they just think, oh, I'll just be gone for a second. The same thing happens with childhood drownings. I mean, people just don't think it's going to happen to them, and it does. And so there's no way we're going to be able to cut out 100% of these. But, as mentioned from the Everytown presentation, if we could cut down half of them, that's half of people's children that are surviving. So
I think the other part that we see, and depending upon where you were raised, is I know the NRA has a program that is there. I have no problems with I think our children in schools need to understand what a firearm is about and what it works as far as that, and a program that at least teaches that side. We're missing. I hate to say, most of what they learn about firearms is what they see on TV or in the movies, and most of that is not reality of a lot of what we're seeing. So I think education is a part. I think about this when I went to high school. We actually had I know this is going to shock some people. I'm not that old, but I mean, we had a rifle team, and I carried a rifle down the hallway of the school.
Yeah.
There was never a shooting as far as that, but we understood how firearms worked, what they were about from that standpoint. So I think supervision is part of that. That's why I was asking. I believe that we are in crisis right now for families and for our children. They are in crisis not only in a firearms area, but in many, many, many other areas that they're raising themselves, if you will, and they're being influenced by social media, by TV, and what they gather there from that standpoint. But I was just interested is, when I see toddler, that has to be an unsupervised, or are you thinking?
I don't know. That's a child who pulls a gun from the back seat of a car or from their mother's purse.
Right, right.
That's where that happens. So yeah, the parents are negligent, but for causing that to happen, and they'll have to live with that for the rest of their lives.
And I believe there was a case a few years ago where a toddler pulled a firearm from their couch,
Yeah.
fired it,
Right.
and then the parents ran in and to see what was going on, and the actual parent picked up the firearm and accidentally fired it a second time. And I mean, these stories are all over the place.
They're all over the place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you missed my first kind of conversation about this, but if you just do an internet search on,
I got half of you.
okay,
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, just look and you'll get a page full of child gunshot injuries in Georgia for the past year, and it's just page after page of them.
I want to kind of include a discussion from the churches as well, because I understand the school system plays an important role in a child's life, and so do our religious institutions. As part of this discussion, what about educating kids? Because I don't see, certainly in the church that I've been a member of for many, many years, as well as those I've attended, where churches make a huge concerted effort to educate the public about gun storage safety. What do you think of that idea of teaming up with churches in this effort? And this is Pastor Sean Smith, who I had the privilege of serving with on the board not very long ago, last week, I do believe. Awesome presenter, by the way.
First off, I just want to say my name is Brother Sean Smith. I'm a associate pastor at First Iconium Baptist Church. One of the things that is important is I think that as an obligation from a Christian standpoint, we are obligated to do and more to savoring our kids. One of the things that Jesus teaches us from a religious standpoint is that we have to be careful on how we raise our kids and how we educate our kids and how we bring forth our kids. And from that retrospect, one of the things that are important, I think that churches have tried to take on this issue. I can speak for my church in particular. What we've done is that we've actually dedicated a whole side of our church to gun violence and combating gun violence. We've actually partnered with over 10 different nonprofits, and we worked with Hope Hustlers before on different cases as far as working with youth. One of the stories that I wanted to tell is kind of, one day I was actually sitting in my office and I got a phone call from a teacher in Cobb County, and she contacted me and she said, I need you to speak to one of my students because I know you work in this field. And I spoke to the student, and the student had just been shot that morning, had come to school after being shot, and literally had taken himself and cut and sewed himself up and tried to cover the bullet up himself because he was afraid of going to the emergency room because he was afraid of what the repercussions would be following that. And we see this happening every single day. And not only do we have an obligation to protect students from kids from themselves, but we have an obligation to protect kids from other kids, because we see a lot of shootings that are happening by young people as well. And that's an important thing too. So I think education is important. One of the things that we do in our center is that we actually educate students on conflict resolution. How do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with if you're angry and you're upset? How do you deal with those emotions? One of the things that we do also is we educate parents on how to safely store their guns, how to safely use their guns, how to make sure that in their homes, the children don't have access to their guns. I think that there's a partnership that can be there created through the church. I think that it comes from an educational standpoint. I think that we can work with the state to actually implement programs, but it's going to require funding as well. And it's going to require a lot of churches to take up the mantle of actually saying that there's more that we can do in that space.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned funding to the panelists that I've just empowered here today. Where's the money coming from? What pocket should the state tap in an effort to promote educating and publishing material and reaching out to various members across the great state to educate them? Where should our funding, where should the funding come from?
As far as
And then I'm gonna give you Mr. Dungy, right, from Hope Hustlers?
Yes, sir.
You got to be next after this. And this is a speed round, by the way, so I just want, as we run out of time, if you all would just, I know you're our last presenters, by the way, so I wanted to invite you up, so when you speak, you can also give your presentation. Sean, I know you're, Pastor, you're really good at doing this anyway. But just think about that for a moment. Where would the state get resources from? Because as you know, we tax and spend. We're going to tax the hell out of you, then we go spend the money somewhere. What sources, in all sincerity, by the way, should we look at in terms of being able to put and build a foundation in Georgia that's sustainable, that will communicate to all the corners from the north to the south, from those up in the mountains to those on the beaches down in Savannah, and both sides of the state, by the way, and furthering this cause. Think about that for a moment. And that's why I'm speaking, by the way, because I'm giving you a chance to gather your thoughts. We got a school board member here. We got a physician. We got the religious community over here on my left. Think about that for a moment. And Senator, I just wanted to phrase this question to him because we get that a lot. And a lot of legislation, Lauren would tell you, really doesn't make it because we have to recognize as legislators that there's a cost involved. If not, then we know appropriations and our fiscal department would tell us that there's a cost involved with everything that we do. How do we get past that?
Well, I understand there's a surplus of money in the state, and think of all the money that would be saved from costs spent in hospital bills, rehab bills for children that are shot,
Excellent.
funerals. I mean,
I think what you just said is tap into some of the state's reserve. I don't know if that's possible, but
here's
we can
here's
do
the-
that, but it's not
yeah.
sustainable though.
Here's
Okay.
the issue. If you look at anything, I'm going to make a statement. Government does not do a lot of things well.
mhm.
I'm sorry, they just do not. And I think this is that we have a vast private sector that gives to all kind of things, if you will. And not that I'm against dogs, but from saving of dogs and cats to everything else, we ought to be able to collect money for humans very easily. I hope that should be a part. And I think that we are far better to try to find a resolution or a solution to the problem. We will not solve all of it, but can we do? I was just looking here. One of my notes is talking about the number of weapons that are stolen from cars. Maybe an accessory you might like is putting a box in there that's lockable in every car. Make that an option that's there.
Yep.
And
Yeah, that idea.
you like that idea. I
I
think
do.
That's a mandate, though.
No. Yeah. Or maybe you give a tax credit for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That may be the other part. That's not a mandate, but it's there.
Yeah.
But I think this is that we need to look at this family issue. I'm sure that Pastor, one of your greatest struggles is finding family, keeping the family unit together. And I mean, we need our young men especially are void of godly influences of men in their lives. And bear with me, they go to school. Most of the time they got teachers that are female, not that that's bad, but they need men. And I'm grateful for this. I had a father that was in my life he taught me how to shoot. He taught me those things. And that's a void that how do we bring that together as well? And the schools are faced with that, not only in the firearms area, but in other areas as well. But I think this is it. Can we look at that and come together in agreement? And I mean, we've got a diversity here of how do we come across together to deal with that, whether that's a school program from the NRA or whoever it is, just to teach that. And I mean, I see people who you would think it was a snake, it would bite them. It's a piece of metal, but we need to teach them good safety lessons. I think could be taught. How do we get families involved as far as that? How do we get people involved? Because even in churches, some churches have their own security teams there because of some of the issues that have happened in our churches. But I think this is that if we can find private funds to do it with, I think we are far more effective, in my opinion, if we can come together that way. No doubt the government can give incentives, but are we asking government to do it, or is there something we can do ourselves? That's just a thought.
And thank you. And I agree with part of that statement. The problem that I see is there are some poor parts of the community that do not have that ability to raise those kind of funds, and may not have the resources to really communicate effectively to their members at their church, or some of our school systems, as you know, struggle financially as well. I'm trying to, I don't want to absolve state government of a responsibility, Certainly, I've heard about tapping into reserves, but that's not sustainable. I mean, what kind of model is out there, Lauren, or any of the other presenters? We mentioned tax incentives from, I know Ms. Lee left, I think she did, but she had a really good presentation about tax incentives, taxes in Florida as well, who has done a much better job than Georgia. Their fatality rate is almost half of what Georgia's is. What are they doing? And these are states that we compare ourselves to, certainly politically and in a lot of other areas. Think about that for a right. Let me just go over here to Mr. Dungy. Did I get that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. You may be familiar. I've been doing this work, Senator, for about 20 years. You're familiar with my mother, Visions Unlimited, Gwendolyn Sands.
Absolutely.
So I'm the next generation, right? So Hope Hustlers is just a much more catchier name because we're dealing with youth and young adults. But we are a nationally recognized organization. Actually, we politically, we defer to the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act politically. We are a community outreach organization, and we work with the highest risk individuals, those who are at the highest risk for committing or being victims of violence. Now, that's in the schools or whether it be in the communities. And for us, this issue is getting back to what Senator Harbin said, we have to address those individuals and their families. These families are in crisis. And so for so long, this has been going on that these families are dealing with unaddressed trauma. The unaddressed trauma tends to numb us to the violence that's actually occurring. But so, not to get ahead of myself, but the funding, I want to mention that while we're on that topic, is that I'm being funded by the Department of Justice right now, the CDC. Again, we were recognized by the White House as the lead organization in Georgia. Right now, we're covering metropolitan Atlanta. We're being funded by DeKalb County. And we're following the model, a national model, which you can see in North Carolina, which you see in Maryland and other states, Illinois. They have an Office of Gun or Office of Violence Prevention. And so the funding tends to skip the state level simply because I just think you're not familiar with it as well as some other states are. And so what happens is I partner with Grady Hospital, the Georgia State, Emory University, Morehouse School of Medicine, and we take a public health approach to violence. I deal with the community. We partner with the 100 Black clergy and other faith-based leaders in order to just go into the community and find those youth that are they're at risk, and it's not just the underserved communities anymore. It's from Bankhead to Buckhead these days because everybody has a gun. And one thing that we've been talking about here today is gun safety. I too had a gun. I had the responsibility of a gun. I'm from the country, and my uncles and my dad and my grandparents, they all hunted. But at 13, that gun was taken away from me, and I was told that I would no longer possess or own a gun until I was old enough, but more importantly, responsible enough. And so when we enter these schools, it's a great idea. I mean, we have to lock these guns up, and we have to be aware of where our guns are and what they're capable of. But it's the responsibility piece that we're missing, especially in our communities, because these youth think that we can pick up a gun and if something happens, I got two more men, just like a video game, and that's not the case. And so the education part is a major piece of what we do. I am in the schools. While we work with certain schools, we want to reach the entire student body, but I have to focus on those who are at highest risk committing or being victims of violence. Now, that's going to look different in North Druid than it will in South DeKalb. Those high-risk individuals were different, but so was the individual wasn't a thug at Sandy Hook until after the shooting. But somebody in that school recognized that something was wrong with that kid. That's the kid that I need to talk to because I need to find out, not just meet him, and Hope Hustlers is cool, so he'll think I'm cool, but I really want to know what's your home situation looking like? What's going on, and why are we here right now? And hopefully, our approach, the public health approach, is to diagnose and treat. While we're not medical doctors, it's the same. Somebody has to reach those individuals, and we're the ones that are boots on the ground. That's when we say community outreach. That's what we do. And so, while we love to partner, and we do partner with several people in this room, we are the ones in the front lines. So, And that's, I hope I answered a couple of questions there. The funding piece, I think if we were to look into something my mother is doing with the MABPP and the clergy, is they want to establish a state office of violence prevention, which would actually have oversight of all of this. And every asset or aspect of violence prevention.
And I want to say something else. You know, one of the things that we talk about Florida is that
Before you do, Pastor, let me just kind of say thank you, by the way, for that suggestion. That's not something that I've thought about, and Senator, I don't know about, Mr. Chairman, I don't know about you, but
if we look at states, North Carolina has an office of violence prevention.
because we need to explore.
The
that
city
and
has
see
one now, I
what-
think.
Yeah, the
but-
city also has one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have
Not
one.
state.
Right, they have
We
one.
got 536 cities in Georgia. Which
Yeah.
city you talking
Right,
about?
Atlanta.
right. You talking about Atlanta.
Sorry.
So for us, we've had to approach it on a county
Not
level.
enough to have it in
Yeah.
one
I
place
know.
because this is
You're
not an
right.
issue just for Metro
Right.
Atlanta.
Yeah, that's why we had to approach it on a countywide level because the city of Atlanta only has 500,000, a little over 500,000 residents. The other 5 million people live in DeKalb and Gwinnett and Clayton and Cobb. So,
And we have a whole bunch of counties.
the whole bunch of counties.
I will mention this. This is something I started last year. I did not get through. But one of the things I would like to see us put chaplains into all public schools. A chaplain is responsible for the health of the individual and or keep him from hurting someone. And we have them
Write
in
that down.
our sporting teams. We have them in our police, our fire, and I will tell you where they are. Your teachers can teach, but and especially as we talked about the family, is not having someone, had dinner with the commander of a nuclear powered submarine. And I said, what's the longest you've been down? He said, 217 days without coming up. He said, we came up because we ran out of food, because we could produce water. He says, I could not operate without our chaplain corps. And he's our chaplain. And I think this is as we deal with our family issue, having a chaplain in our schools he's not a counselor, because the counselor has to write down everything. He's not a resource officer with a gun on his side. He's somebody there that, hey, I need to talk. And I really see that as something that we could work on. That's a local school board issue. Give them, but we got it out of committee last year, but I just see that there's an opportunity to put a person in place that's, how do I say it? Not I got you person, but somebody just to help you. And I don't know about you, even as a grown person, many of us do not have someone we can sit down and just kind of say, hey man, I got a bad day going on. Can I talk to you for a minute? Without risking something. And I don't know, that's just something I'll mention to you. If you'll join with me, I'd love to have you. I think it's a great,
I'm all
it's been
in.
done in
Come
my
on.
chat. Okay. But I think that's where the two of you within the church and within the communities at risk, it's an issue, no doubt about it. So thanks for what you do.
Mr. Webb, please come on up and join us because he started off our discussion. We have nope, don't go anywhere. We're not done with you yet. See, Mr. Ziffer is trying to get out of here. He's got other plans, but you didn't count on this. We have Mr. Webb, who's a parent, by the way, who gave a powerful opening statement. We have the religious community, we have the school board, we have the physicians that are represented here, and you got state government. What would you say to us? And based on what you've experienced and the tragedy in your own life, on the role of these particular entities?
Well, I think it's important to try to set the politics aside as best you can. This is real, and I never thought it would happen to me or my family, but it did, and it's touched us a couple of times. And I would just encourage the legislatures to work together, similar to what I read about when I talked about motor vehicle safety back in the 60s when it was such an epidemic and a public health crisis. I think the vote in Congress was 308 to 3. You don't see that anymore. So I would encourage legislatures to truly work together in a bipartisan fashion. There's got to be a way to find some common ground.
I agree.
Yep.
And I was going to say, going back to when we look at Florida and Texas, one of the things that I don't want Georgia to do is to not learn from Florida and Texas mistakes. Florida moved on legislation when it came to the gun legislation after Parkland happened. And I'm from Broward County. I'm very familiar with Parkland. I'm very familiar with Douglas, Stoneman Douglas High School. One of the things too that, you know, from a biblical standpoint, the Bible says that when Jesus was looking at a crowd of people and he asked his disciples, how much money do we have in the bank? And they said, we only have 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And what is that amongst so many? And Jesus' response was, give me the 2 fish and the 5 loaves of bread. This takes political courage, right? It takes political courage and it takes creativity. And one of the things that even I'm thinking about, like how we talk about how we create these tax incentives for people, why not starting at the very beginning of the door when people purchase guns, to be able to work with the gun sellers and to be able to sell or give away gun locks at the purchase of a gun. The pawn shops, the selling of guns, like to make sure that when you actually purchase a gun, that they're giving you a gun lock, and maybe that's a tax incentive for that business to be able to pass out gun locks. Maybe that's another thing that we need to look at and be creative on trying to pass laws like that, because again, we don't want to have to learn about this or have to do something about it after the fact that there's a mass school shooting.
So what you said is, let's not incentivize someone for buying these safety devices, but incentivize the businesses to distribute these safety devices.
Yeah, and we in Georgia, we have Delta, when we talk about private funding.
Delta themselves, safety devices.
But I'm just saying, when you talk about private funding, we have a lot of companies. I just met with Comcast 2 weeks ago. Comcast was meeting with us about churches and trying to install Wi-Fi in churches, but we had this long conversation about what churches need, right? There are businesses that are out here that want to do things in their community, like Delta, like Comcast, like all these other businesses, to be able to work with them and say, hey, you know what, let's try to raise money and help the state raise money to be able to give guns locks at the purchase of a gun with the gun owners, with the gun sales places, with the pawn shops.
I absolutely love that idea. You got it down, businesses incentivized.
I think
They don't have to.
I think they have to. Federally licensed dealers are supposed to be giving out locks, so they need safes. You know, I think cable locks or trigger locks, they're supposed to be giving out. I mean, I think that's a federal law.
When you buy a new gun,
You have
there
to,
is either a lock
Yep.
or a cabling system
Yep.
that goes into the gun.
Yep.
From that standpoint.
Yes.
That's on new guns. That's.
you have to do that.
So why is no one using them now?
They're not as good. They're not that good. They're better than nothing, but they're cumbersome. And I think for a lot of people, again, if they're using them for self-defense, they want quick access. And that's where the discussion, so safes are inexpensive. So a move towards something like that, to me, like, saying, yeah, you have to give out maybe a safe rather than the cheapo.
When you say a safe, you're discussing.
Yeah, maybe not this big or anything. I mean, this was only maybe $70, $80 or something on Amazon, but there are cheaper, things, but like, even if it's $25 or $50 for a car one, let's say, that's better than what they're mandated to give a cable lock, which are not, I mean, they're better than nothing, but they're not that great. And they're hard to get to when you need them.
I don't think they were intended for that purpose, to be for a gun loaded.
Yes.
It's where you're storing it, you run the cable,
Exactly.
and lock it down, or you put the lock on it for whatever.
Exactly.
There. It's basically how they're delivering the gun.
Yep.
From that
And
standpoint.
those are unloaded guns as well. So again, I go back to the reality of what people are doing, and they're keeping their guns loaded. Obviously, we need to, if they're going to keep them loaded, make sure they have a safe to put the loaded gun in.
Lauren, I know we have 3 other meetings scheduled. I would like to drill down further, if you will, in these other meetings with some of the suggestions that my informal panel has suggested. The education component, the tax incentive, and not just because of tax incentive for individuals in the purchase of weapons to get these safety devices, but also to incentivize businesses with tax incentives as well. What some of those other ideas that we had on?
Safes, chaplains.
She's my note taker about here, by the way.
And
Oh, yes, the chaplains in the schools.
also very important, don't forget the Be Smart program is literally ready and waiting to implement this program in all the schools.
Free.
Free, yeah, in Georgia. It's
Be
called
Smart
Be Smart
program.
program, yes.
You got to have Be Smart to come and join us.
They've been chomping at the bit.
And if some expert could tell me how we can get funding from the state.
Let me
through a
ask this.
Republican legislature.
Well, let me ask this
That
question.
could be a benefit in some kind of way. Senator, I'm
I
sorry.
noticed that Oliver Price was,
Yeah,
and the NRA, I mean, has money already allocated for gun safety. And I was hoping he would be here. I was gonna pick his
do you know
brain.
him?
I don't know. I've met him one time, but I was thinking they've got money that I would
Yeah.
think would be allocated, and that would be something to have them in on the next go and see
How
where
can we
they are.
get some from?
I don't know. You have to ask for it.
He's trying to secure gun locks for us, and he's somebody I'm working with to try and do this event that I described for non-firearm owners. So he is an advocate for safe storage, and he makes a living on training people and selling guns. So yeah, I think he's going to be a great resource if we can for sure get him here.
I was thinking about this as the NRA or even the manufacturers to make their products safer, if you will. They've got a reason to make them safer as far as that. More people would own them, more people would have them as far as that portion. And that's true for any business, is that if you can make it safer, more people will participate. I mean, with what's going on. So I don't know, that might be somebody to have in here and just say, hey, are there other sources? There are foundations, there's things of that nature, and look at what we're talking about.
And he did call. He was planning on coming, but he was sad.
I texted him, and he is sick. I just
Okay.
did a training with him this weekend, actually. So he said he was sick, but I think and I think he's probably listening right now. But yeah, I think he's gonna come and give some information.
Two things that I would like to consider is if we could incentivize the gun manufacturers to sell package deals. When they're selling weapons, they're also selling a safe along with it and providing some kind of incentive for them to do that. So when someone is purchasing a gun, that's just an idea. I'm just coming up with ideas.
I think what he told me, what he does when he sells, he does mostly training, but he'll sell as well, is that he just automatically jacks the cost up a bit to purchase of the gun, because to ensure that everyone purchases safe. He wants to give a safe out.
And I don't know much about safe, those companies that are building and making and marketing these safes, but perhaps that's a discussion we need to have with them as well. Well, we can make their product cheaper
I would,
by incentivizing.
there are gun safes that are large gun safes.
Oh, yeah.
This I would call kind of a lockbox, if you
Yeah.
will, and they're biometrical or either their combination, one of the two as far
Yeah,
as.
this is a three-way, a code and a fingerprint,
Right.
and it's got a key too.
Right, and so they've got them all
Mhm.
from that standpoint, and that's a great exception
Handgun.
on cars sometimes.
Sounds good to me.
This one's kind of big.
We as dealers, we love putting accessories on automobiles.
Mhm.
Have I missed anyone? First of all, let me thank my good friend, Chairman Harbin, for coming, the other members that were of the legislature that were present virtually as well, Senate Press, Megan, Lauren, and all of the presenters here today. I apologize for going a little bit over. And Pastor and my good friend, Pastor Smith, I wanted to do something a little bit different as we ended out. Did I kind of wrap up? Because I think it's important that each of those that are present here today hear what the institutions you represent have to say. And I think we need to drill down further with some of these institutions and see if we can engage them in a way as we move toward proposing ideas of something that we can do, Mr. Chairman, in this body to, as I said earlier, to reduce the rate of fatalities in our great state. Georgia is, and you all have seen the statistics that was presented today, and that's why I had them come and present, but those numbers are too high. And I think one of the presenters said we can do better in this great state, and we should. But again, this is the first of a series of meetings that we are having. All of our meetings will take place, Senate Press, is that correct? Thank you all, in this building, in this room. And if you don't have the calendar, our next meeting is September the 5th, is that correct, Megan?
Yes, it is.
So our next meeting will be September the 5th. Tell someone in the community about what we're doing here. And I'm serious about putting forth some ideas that my friends on both sides of the aisle can support as we move this process forward. The compelling stories I've heard from families, Mr. Webb, thank you for telling your story. And I know that story certainly resonated in my heart, in my spirit. And we need to do more. We need and we should in this great state. I always say that we have to be forward looking and forward thinking in this process, Mr. Chairman. And I think if we can get some good ideas, we can do just that and protect those children out there that come well after we've left this body and gone on. So that's my hope and that's my prayer as well. Is there anything from anyone else for the good of the body? Lauren, again, thank you. And all the other guests that sit quietly out there, I don't know who you are, but next time I know you're going to sign up to speak. And if they're, I apologize for, I had a sign-up sheet, we didn't distribute it because I wanted to engage these committees and those that are present here today. Thank you all for being here and thank you. And we will send out notice for our next meeting. Thank you and God bless each and every last one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned.